I was stunned when the HOA foreclosed my home over a $55 fine, and I had no idea my dad's fearsome legal skills were about to flip my world upside down. Can you guess how I turned this nightmare into my ultimate victory? Welcome to our channel. Please subscribe if you want more Karen and HOA stories. I never thought that a tiny $55 fine could turn my whole life upside down. One bright morning, I opened my mailbox and found a letter that made my heart race. It said the HOA was taking away my house because of that small fine. I felt a mix of fear and disbelief as I held the paper in my hands. I thought, how can something so small cause such a big problem? I knew something was very wrong, but I didn't know what to do yet. Every day before this happened, I tried to be a good neighbor. I kept my yard neat and my home quiet. But there was one person who always made a fuss: Karen. Karen lived next door, and she always complained about even the tiniest sound. Whether it was the wind rustling through the trees or a car passing by, she found something to grumble about. To me, she seemed very entitled and overbearing, always ready to make a big scene over small issues. I did my best to stay calm and be kind, even when she was mean. I believed that being reasonable would win in the end, but I soon learned that things are not always fair. That morning, as I sat with the letter, I remembered all the times Karen had nagged about every little thing. I wondered if her constant complaints had led the HOA to see me as a troublemaker. My mind raced with questions. Did the HOA listen to Karen too much? Was it possible that someone could use a small fine as a way to punish someone they did not like? I decided that I needed to learn more about what was happening, so I began to research. I went online and looked up property, maps, and the rules of our HOA. I wanted to know every detail about the fine and why it had come to this. I read pages of documents and learned about the rules that we all had to follow. I discovered that sometimes a rule could be used in ways that hurt people. This made me even more determined to understand the truth. I also talked to a few friends in the neighborhood. Some of them whispered that Karen had a history of stirring up trouble. They said that she would often go to the HOA meetings and speak in a loud voice, making everyone uncomfortable. I listened carefully and took notes. I wanted to know if there was a connection between her behavior and the HOA's decision to foreclose my home. I wondered if she had ever done anything like this before. The more I asked, the more I felt like I was uncovering a secret hidden behind our quiet neighborhood. I knew that if I wanted to fight back, I needed to be smart and gather as many facts as possible. As I sat at my kitchen table with my research spread out in front of me, I felt a spark of hope. I began to piece together the puzzle. I drew simple maps of the area and marked important spots like where Karen's house was and where the HOA office was located. I looked at the property lines and the meeting notes from past HOA sessions. Every detail, no matter how small, became a clue in this mystery. I remembered my dad's words from long ago about never giving up when things seem unfair. Although I had not mentioned it to anyone, I knew that my dad was not just any lawyer. He was known for being strong and for standing up for what was right. I began to think that maybe, just maybe, his skills could help me if I needed it. I also started writing down every encounter I had with Karen. The next time I heard her yelling from her porch, I recorded the conversation on my phone. I kept a diary of every odd moment, the times when her eyes seemed to follow me as I walked by, the days when I saw her standing by the HOA door, as if she were waiting for trouble to start. Each small event added up, and I began to see a pattern. Karen's anger and the HOA's harsh actions seemed connected, but I still did not have all the answers. The mystery deepened as I realized that this was not just about a fine or a complaint. It was about power and control. Late one afternoon, I went to the local library to search for old news, articles about the HOA and Karen. The quiet hum of the computers and the smell of old books gave me a feeling of determination. I typed keywords into the computer, and slowly, stories began to appear on the screen. Some of the articles talked about unfair fines and the strict rules of the HOA. One article mentioned that the HOA had sometimes made decisions that hurt good people who tried their best to be kind. I saved these articles, thinking they might be important later on. I left the library with a stack of papers in my bag and a mind full of questions. How could such a small fine lead to the loss of my home? Was the HOA really that strict, or was there something else going on behind the scenes? That evening, I sat in my living room and looked at the letter again. I tried to calm myself, but my thoughts were racing. I thought about how I had always tried to do what was right and how I had never meant to cause any trouble. The idea that my home could be taken away over something so small was hard to believe. I wondered if I would ever get a chance to tell my side of the story. As the sun set outside my window, I made a promise to myself. I promised that I would not give up without a fight. I would use everything I had learned and every bit of research to stand up for myself. I would show that a tiny fine could not break my spirit. At that moment, I felt a mix of sadness and determination. I knew that the next steps I took would be very important. I planned to go to the next HOA meeting and ask tough questions. I thought about showing them the maps and documents I had collected. I also thought about reaching out to local news stations to share my story. I believed that if enough people knew the truth, maybe the HOA would have to listen. I felt like I was on the edge of a big change, but I still had many questions. How could I prove that I was treated unfairly? Would anyone believe me over someone as loud and angry as Karen? As I prepared for the night, my mind kept wandering back to the letter. I held on to a small hope that everything could be fixed if I just stood my ground and stayed calm. The idea of going to the HOA meeting filled me with nervous energy. I knew that if I presented my facts well, I might be able to stop this injustice. I practiced what I would say, carefully choosing my words so that even someone as simple as a fourth grader could understand. I wanted to be clear and honest. I promised myself that I would not let fear stop me from telling my story. The next day, I woke up early and reviewed my notes again. I looked at the property maps and the articles from the library, feeling that every piece of information was a building block in my case. I wondered if I was ready to face the board and Karen together. Even though I felt small against the big system of the HOA, I believed that truth and kindness could win in the end. I packed my papers and prepared to head out, knowing that my life was about to change in ways I could not yet see. As I walked toward the HOA office later that day, I saw Karen standing by the door with a stern look on her face. Her eyes met mine, and I could feel the weight of her disapproval. I took a deep breath and tried to remember why I was there, to seek fairness and to protect my home. I knew that my research, my maps, and even my quiet determination were my weapons in this battle. I reminded myself that sometimes the smallest voices could echo the loudest when they spoke the truth. I stepped forward, my heart beating quickly, knowing that the journey ahead would be long and full of twists. I wondered if anyone could truly see the real story behind this small fine and the big problems it had caused. I left the HOA office that day with more questions than answers. The meeting was brief and confusing, and Karen's sharp remarks only made me more determined to fight for what was mine. I returned home, sitting quietly at my desk with all my collected notes spread out before me. The day had been hard, but it had also given me a clear purpose. I knew that I would keep digging, keep learning, and keep standing up for myself no matter what. And deep inside, I knew that this was only the beginning of a much bigger story, one that would soon reveal secrets I never imagined. Every small step I took that day, every question I asked, and every piece of paper I collected became part of a puzzle that I was determined to solve. I promised myself that I would not let anyone take away my home without a good fight. I also promised that I would not let Karen's angry voice and the strict rules of the HOA silence my own. The journey had just started, and I was ready to keep moving forward, no matter how hard it became. I was shocked when the HOA said my home was in trouble over a $55 fine, and I knew things were only about to get more complicated. I felt a mix of worry and determination as I looked at the old paper in my hands. I remembered my dad's kind but strong voice telling me that every problem has a way out if we work hard and follow the rules. I also knew that Karen, my overbearing neighbor who always thought she was right, would not let this pass quietly. I began my search for answers by going to the town library. I found old property, maps and simple records that told the story of our little neighborhood. I wrote down notes in my notebook with clear words and simple drawings. I wanted to know exactly how the rules worked and if the fine was fair. Every new fact I learned made me feel a little braver. I discovered that our community's rules were meant to help everyone and not just a few people. Even though it was hard work, I kept going because I knew that truth was on my side. At home, my dad joined me in reading the documents. He explained the rules in a calm voice, making sure I understood every word. He told me that sometimes small mistakes, like an unpaid $50 fine, could be used in a big way by people who wanted control. I listened carefully as he explained how the law was meant to protect us all. My dad's clear and kind words filled me with hope. With his help, I sorted through the papers and made a strong list of facts that showed how the fine had grown into something unfair. I felt like I was building a solid case piece by piece, like putting together a simple puzzle. The next day, I planned to attend a meeting with the HOA board. I was nervous but excited because I knew that speaking up was the only way to fix the problem. I practiced my words over and over in front of a mirror, keeping my tone calm and clear. I wanted everyone to understand that I was not trying to cause trouble, but only to set the record straight. Just as I was about to leave, I saw Karen outside my door. She gave me a cold look and said something mean about how I should mind my own business. Even though her words stung, I held my head high and walked to the meeting. Inside the meeting room, the board members looked at me with mixed expressions. I began to share my story, explaining how a small fine had been turned into a big problem that risked taking away my home. I showed them the maps and the papers I had gathered. I spoke slowly and clearly so that everyone could understand. For a moment, the room was quiet, and I felt that maybe they understood. But then, Karen burst into the conversation with a loud voice. She said that I had broken rules and that I was causing trouble for everyone. I took a deep breath and listened carefully. I knew that if I let anger take over, I would lose the chance to show the truth. After Karen finished, I calmly continued with my story. I explained what I had learned about the rules and how the fine did not match the serious punishment of foreclosure. I used the simple facts from my notebook to show that a small mistake had been blown out of proportion. The board members exchanged looks, and some even nodded slowly. I felt a spark of hope as I saw that my words were reaching them. After the meeting, I recorded the conversation on my phone. I knew that having a record would help me later if things got worse. Later that day, I shared a short video clip on social media, telling my story in clear, simple language. The clip quickly caught the attention of many neighbors, and soon messages of support started to roll in. People asked questions like, how could one small fine lead to so much trouble? And is it fair to treat someone this way? Their curiosity and concern gave me strength. I realized that our little community was beginning to stand up for what was right, even though Karen tried to make her voice louder. Days turned into weeks, and I continued to work on my case with my dad. We met with a few kind neighbors who had also faced problems with the HOA, and together, we shared our stories. One friendly neighbor, Sam, even offered to help us print flyers. We made the flyers with big, clear letters and simple words so that everyone, even a fourth grader, could understand what was happening. The flyers explained the rules of our community and pointed out how one mistake had led to something unfair. It felt good to know that our work was starting to bring the truth to light. During this time, Karen's behavior grew more hostile. I received a few letters filled with angry words from her. I even saw her standing near my house, glaring with a scowl. It was clear that she felt her control slipping away, and she was ready to fight back. Even though her letters were mean, I kept my calm and focused on the facts. I believed that truth would win over anger in the end. I remember one evening when I was going over my notes with my dad. The room was quiet, and the soft sound of the clock ticking filled the air. We talked about every piece of paper, every map, and every rule we had read. My dad pointed out a few mistakes in the HOA's record from long ago. He explained that sometimes even those in power can get things wrong. This made me think, if mistakes could happen to the people in charge, then maybe I could prove that the fine was a mistake too. It was a small idea, but it shone like a little light in a dark room. I felt a mix of emotions. I was proud of all the work I had done, but I also worried about what Karen might do next. I wondered if she would try something even harsher. I thought about the neighbors who had come forward with their stories, and I felt their courage in my heart. Every message of support reminded me that I was not alone. I was fighting not just for my home, but for the fairness of our whole community. One bright morning, I received a call from a local reporter who had seen my video online. The reporter wanted to meet me and ask a few questions about my story. My heart pounded with both excitement and nervousness. I knew that this was another chance to tell my side of the story to even more people. I agreed to the interview, and that day, I explained my situation in simple, honest words. I talked about the fine, the foreclosure, and how I had used research and simple maps to show that something was not right. The reporter listened closely, and I could tell that she understood. I hoped that when her story was on TV, more people would see that one small mistake should not ruin a life. With every step I took, I felt like I was building a bridge between the truth and those who needed to hear it. I realized that even in hard times, when the odds seemed stacked against me, I could stand up with calm and clear words. I used my research, the maps, the records, and even the power of social media to fight back. I was not just a quiet person. I was someone who believed in fairness and was ready to show that even a small fine did not give someone the right to take away a home. As I sat at my desk that night, looking at the neat pile of notes and the printed flyers, I knew that our fight was far from over. I felt a strong desire to keep going, to learn more, and to prepare for the next challenge. I wondered what new twist would come next. Would Karen try another trick? Could the truth really change the minds of those in power? I knew that I had to stay ready, because the next steps might be even more surprising. I took a deep breath and looked out the window at the quiet street, where every neighbor seemed to have their own story. I promised myself that no matter what happened next, I would keep seeking the truth and standing up for what was right. My journey had taught me that even a small action could lead to big changes. And as I turned off the light that night, I felt both the weight of responsibility and the lightness of hope. Knowing that our next move could change everything, I stood in my living room, heart racing, as I prepared for the biggest challenge yet. My home was on the line, and the HOA's unfair actions and Karen's constant bad behavior had pushed me to my limit. In the first few seconds of this fight, I knew I had to stay calm and smart. I had done my homework, researching property maps, gathering legal knowledge, and even talking to reporters. I was ready, and I wasn't going to let Karen or the HOA win. My dad's legal advice had been my guiding light. Together, we pored over old property maps and documents that showed my home was safe from any claims the HOA tried to make. Every piece of paper was a clue that proved I was right all along. I remember the day I found an old map at the local library that showed my property lines clearly. It was like finding a hidden treasure that supported my case. This discovery gave me the strength to move forward. I could see the truth shining through, and it made me even more determined. I went to a small meeting with the HOA board. The room was tense, and Karen sat at the front with a haughty look on her face. Even as she spoke in a loud, demanding tone, I listened carefully. I knew that every word she said was meant to unsettle me, but I stayed calm and collected. I took notes and used my research to ask clear, simple questions about the property maps and legal documents I had collected. The board members looked surprised when I pointed out the details that contradicted Karen's claims. I could tell that I had caught them off guard, and it made me feel even more confident. Then came the day when I invited a local reporter to see my documents and the property maps. I wanted to show everyone that I was not alone, and that my story was one of fairness and truth. The reporter listened carefully as I explained how the 55 fine had turned into a massive injustice. I kept my voice steady and kind, even when I described Karen's overbearing ways. Her entitlement had caused so much trouble for everyone, and it was clear that the HOA had let that get out of hand. The media coverage helped bring more attention to my case, and soon, more neighbors started asking questions about the HOA's decisions. This was a small win that made me feel like I was not fighting alone. My dad and I worked late into the night, reviewing every detail of the legal documents. We built a simple plan that even a fourth grader could understand. The facts were on our side. Every piece of evidence we gathered was like a brick in a strong wall protecting my home. I remember feeling a mix of fear and hope as I looked at the papers. I knew that every step we took could change everything. The story of my struggles spread slowly through our community, and I started to see nods of agreement and whispers of support from my neighbors. On the day of the final decision, I walked into the courtroom with a calm heart and a clear mind. I explained my findings using the property maps, the legal research, and even quotes from the local news. I did not shout or show anger, only truth and reason. The judge listened to every word, and I could feel the weight of my hard work in every pause. When the decision came in my favor, I felt a deep sense of relief and pride. I had stood up for my home with the help of research, clear facts, and a brave heart. Even as I left the courtroom, I wondered about the next twist in this story. What would Karen do now that her claims had been shown to be wrong? I knew that this victory was just one chapter in a larger fight for fairness in our neighborhood.